We'll start the study session, and we'll start out with a Peter report on the tree board.
Good job.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba. I'm Peter Pastorelli, the Public Works Director and the staff liaison to the City of Milwaukee's tree board. And Kathleen had intended to be here tonight, but she wasn't able to get off of work in time to make the time. She just sent me an email a few minutes ago.
Peter, with the noise in this room, it's really difficult for me to hear you. I don't know if anybody else.
I don't think that magnifies for us.
I don't think it does
Okay,
either.
I
so-
will try to project a little bit louder.
Thank you, and I'm going to
Sure.
turn them up one more notch.
Yeah, I just turned mine up.
Okay, sorry about that. As you all are aware, Andy Taylor, our tree board chair, recently moved to Bend, Oregon. In fact, I think he moved this past weekend. Hopefully, he was able to make it through the snow. And it was sort of a last-minute move. His wife ended up getting a job out there at Bend, and he works from home with the job that he has, so was able to make that move. And Andy was really an extraordinary person, and was really very a valuable team member of the tree board. And it's going to be really hard to replace him. He put a lot of effort and spent a lot of time working on items related to the tree board. So what I was going to do a little bit tonight is talk a little bit about what the tree board did last year, and then what we've got coming up this upcoming year. So highlights. So we've got those were the tree board members: Andy Taylor, the chair; Kathleen Brennan Hunter, the vice chair; Ann Leenstra, Linda Carr, Leigh Garnett, Gina Dake, and Rebecca Ives. We had two new board members last year, Gina and Kathleen, and now we have a vacancy with Andy leaving. So we're getting ready to go ahead and start that recruitment shortly. We had our Arbor Day April 21st, same day we had the Earth Day. We were fortunate enough to have the governor out there to help participate in the tree planting ceremony. That was really nice. One of the things we are going to do this year different is we heard some of the input from council at the last meeting and talked a little bit with the tree board. We're going to actually move our Arbor Day to the fall this year. We do have a Friends of Tree event, though, scheduled April, that the Friends of Trees is organizing and doing. But we're going to do our actual official Arbor Day event in this fall, the date to be determined. So I did want to announce just this afternoon, we received an email from the Department of Forestry that we received our third Tree City USA designation. So 2016, 17, and 18. PARB was very instrumental in the first application, the 2016 application. So we've continued that success. And then we've also recently updated the Urban Forest website on the city's website. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at it. I think there's been some social media posts associated with that and tells you where to go to take a look at that. Wanted to talk a little bit about the Tree City USA pieces and sort of a comparison of our expenses and the things that we've done over the last year. So there's a big jump in our per capita spending in 2018, and that's related to how we capture some of our personnel expenses and management expenses that weren't captured earlier in those previous years. Just this past year, 2018, we updated some job descriptions where we had our landscape workers, and we've made them a natural resource technician and a natural resource coordinator. We have the natural resource coordinator is a certified arborist, so we're capturing part of his time and effort into those expenses as well. And then I've sort of followed the same, just highlighting how much dollars we spent in some of the different areas. Now I know the mayor mentioned in his State of the City addressed that we planted about 165 trees over the last 2 months. Those 145 trees were prior to those 165 trees. So this was at the application time that we planted. So over the last 2 years, we've planted about 200 or 310 trees over the last year. And still working to plant some more. In the late summer and early fall, as part of our work on our urban forest management plan and part of the work that the tree board did, we had a pretty robust community engagement process where we had an online survey. We went out to all the different NDAs, went to the farmers market and other sorts of events, and talked to the community about trees. We think during that period we reached out and saw over 300 people and had conversations with those in the community. So we thought we had a pretty good piece there. One of the things we did do, and I think I provided it in early January, was a summary report of that outreach effort, that engagement effort that we did, that outlined the questions that we asked the community regarding the urban forest management plan. That outreach and education component is really an important part of what the tree board does, and there's several members that really enjoy that component of working with trees, talking to the community and providing education to the community about trees and how trees fit into the community and the importance of trees. The other thing that the main thing that we worked on last year was our urban forest management plan. We provided a draft to City Council in January, and it focused on these 6 focus areas. Basically, our urban forest size, that urban canopy component, the age and species diversity of our urban forest, maintaining our urban forest in a healthy condition, so that forest health. It discusses street tree management, so we're looking to maximize benefits and minimize hazards and conflicts with our infrastructure. Consolidating our management of our urban forest under one department, and then fostering that community support through a robust outreach and education process. So those are those 6 focus areas that urban forest management plan discusses and outlines goals associated with that, criteria, and an action plan as well. One of the things that we did based off of that discussion that we had with council is we've gone back to the plan, made some revisions, and at our next tree board meeting next week, we're going to review those revisions and bring it back to council in early March, hopefully for adoption. This is basically the process, though, that we went through developing that urban forest management plan. I wanted to highlight or show an example of some of the revisions that we made. If you recall, some of the plan was sort of prescriptive. It said that if we adopt this plan, we were going to do these certain items. So I've changed the language. So in this case, instead of adopt, it would say consider amendments. So there's that process that we'll go through, and that was the intent all along. That there's an additional process that we're going to go through. It wasn't going to set those things into stone by the adoption of that urban forest management plan. So we changed the language, revised that language to include that additional process in it. So our next steps of what we'd like to do really is bring back the urban forest management plan to city council at one of the March council sessions for adoption. And then, once the plan is adopted, we will begin putting together some code packages, draft code packages. We've been working on some of those in parallel already, having discussions with staff, our planning department, and some of our community development and engineering staff on what that code might look like. And we're looking at really sort of breaking it down into really three components there. A public and street tree piece, a code update related to development, and then an update that relates to preservation and protection of trees on private property as well. And then one of the things that we're also going to do as we go through that process of updating that code is also take a look at those hardship issues that I think we talked about at our last meeting, to make sure that there's a mechanism to address those types of things. As part of that process, we see that we've got to do some additional engagement and outreach with some of these different packages of codes there with the community. So I'm actually working with, getting ready to work with EnviroIssues to help me develop an engagement plan to address some of those issues. We want that engagement and this discussion to be transparent with the community, and we want to make sure that there's an awareness of the trade-offs on what we're doing. You know, when we talk about trees and development and infrastructure, there's certainly points where all three of them come into conflict, and we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what those conflicts are and what those trade-offs are, and that we understand those consequences when we put the code together and bring it to council for adoption, and that everybody understands and has an opportunity to look at that. And then one of the other things we'll be working on as well is updating the street tree list. We've been working on that to some extent. There's a couple different iterations of street tree lists. I think PARB had at one time worked on a street tree list. We've got it in our public works standards. There's one in our PARs for the downtown, and we want to make sure that we have a consistent street tree list that we can use to the future that addresses the needs for the community as we move forward. So I know, Mayor Gamba, you'd asked at the last meeting sort of what was that timeline for some of that code. And, unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult now to give you a good date on some of those with Andy's departure. I need to sit down with the tree board this next week and sort of game plan what that's going to look like. Andy was heavily involved and had the time, was able to make the time to meet with staff during the day. So we've got to look and see who might also be available to do some of those things. But we're going to work through those sorts of things. I do think we've got a lot of the public and street tree piece sort of already in place. That's one of the easier ones. But when we get to the development one, which is going to involve some discussion with land use, that lengthens the process a little bit because we have to involve the planning commission on some of those aspects there. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we've included the community in that process as well. So, I did want to highlight the tree on the picture on the bottom. Those are trees we just planted last week at our public works facility. So we built a new island out in the yard there, and we planted 3 evergreen oaks. I think they're cork oaks, I think is what Julian told me. So they'll grow. They're sort of set for that sort of environment, so. Are there any questions?
I guess, so if he was that integral, what's the skill set or the lifestyle maybe that we need to be looking for when we replace him?
That's a good question. So Andy was able to work from home with his job. So he was able to make some time and schedule his time a little bit differently than somebody that works in an office. So that flexibility was important. And then, also ensuring that somebody has that interest in the technical piece of putting together tree code. We've done a lot of it. We've formulated a lot of the language. It's just repackaging it and to make it clearer and go through some decision points on what those protections and preservation regulations are.
So going forward, I mean, because he had a forestry background, right?
He did.
So
Yeah.
going forward, do you think more about, do you think that work has substantially been done and now it's more of a technical, going forward, this replacement might be more of a technical, actual writing code assistance? Or I'm wondering if you're saying that there might be opportunity for a different skill set or.
Well, that's what I was, trying to ascertain is.
I think it's having somebody that has the flexibility to spend time, either in their after hours, and the willingness to spend that time on working on drafting code, or being able to do it in work, spend time in workshops with staff.
And you said you'll meet with the tree board next week, so maybe there might be some.
Yeah.
And
that-
we do have a pretty strong group on tree board. Gina is an arborist. She works for the Portland Parks and Rec, and she's got a really good background in urban forestry. And she'd worked with Andy on drafting some of the code pieces that we put together. It's just getting everything packaged and going through that engagement process and having the time to do that. Having somebody that has the after-work time to do that sort of thing.
Okay.
A lot of what we're doing, communities spend several hundreds of thousands of dollars with consultants putting together an urban forest management plan and updating their tree code.
Does the person need to live in the city of Milwaukee?
I don't believe that they do, actually.
Decide on that. I thought there was
You guys remember? You helped
An
us write the
allowance?
charter.
We have a
You have
requirement
it?
that somebody has to be an arborist.
Yeah.
Yeah, theoretically two, right?
Because there's an arborist position, so
Yeah.
specialty positions, I think, are.
Okay.
5 residents, 1 certified arborist, so that would then make 2 positions that could be non-resident.
And we've got 5 residents already, right, at this
That
point?
are,
Yes.
One of
I mean,
them
I
is an
didn't see any
arborist.
non-residents on the list, but, okay.
Yeah. So
That
only
widens
one
the
arborist
potential
now
pool.
on the board?
That's the requirement, just one arborist.
Yeah, and that's Gina.
Gina.
Oh, I thought there was a requirement for two, no?
No, one.
We have to have 1 certified arborist at all times.
Okay. Right.
So, yeah, so, I mean, Andy's departure has certainly caused us some issues and problems for us in terms of the process, but we'll work through that and keep moving forward, so.
And he doesn't want to telecommute?
Well, I've talked to him about that. so.
I mean, I'm going to be in
I-
Bend this weekend, so if I
Yeah,
need to do
no, I've
an
talked to him
in-person
about it.
appeal,
I said, you could probably still stay on the board for a while.
I'd be offered. I said, "Yeah, forget anything, just give me a call."
Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, it'll happen.
I did talk a little bit about this already, though, but, you know, our outreach and education, engagement objectives as we move forward are, we really want to gain feedback from the community on these proposed updates to the tree code, make sure that we understand the public's considerations and what concerns that they might have. You know, we did get some good feedback in the early fall when we did our online survey and met with various groups. We ended up making some changes to the urban forest management plan based off of that feedback, made revisions there, so that was really useful. But we want to use that feedback to help us develop a strong tree ordinance that fits the needs of the community and that helps incentivize that protection and preservation of our urban forest. And we want to make sure that we engage a broad spectrum of the community to make sure that we're not missing parts of the community there. And once again, we want to make sure that we raise the awareness of those trade-offs of what we're trying to do. You know,
When you are doing outreach, or is it mostly, are you mostly engaging with residents? Because I see property owners and developers, I just wonder, you know, are we making sure that we're reaching out to commercial property owners as well, manufacturing property owners? I'm just wondering if there's,
Yeah, that is our intent.
Okay.
To do that there, yeah, absolutely. We want to meet with developers and commercial business owners and industrial.
I'd hate to see some,
businesses.
you know, maybe some misinformation, you know, fear, you know, that this is coming, and, I mean, I know, and maybe this isn't the reason for it, but, you know, when I ride my train each day, I look over at the, there's a large stand of trees that came down in the innovation area, North Milwaukee, and I just, part of me was thinking, was that in anticipation of some, you know, with some fear or misunderstanding about what the code was going to do? And so I just want to make sure that we're reaching out to those folks to let them know that there is an engagement piece of this, that you don't have to go cut down all of your trees for fear that
Sure.
we're coming for you, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have had conversations with some of our industrial customers in the community already as part of our climate action planning process that we went through. And one of them, Blunt, in fact, they're very interested in growing their canopy on their side. And
That's great to hear.
They have some space to do that.
What is that?
Blunt.
Yeah, just had another conversation with them.
Yeah. So, yeah, we want to raise that awareness of trade-offs and also, you know, inform the community why this is important. Why are we doing this, you know? There's a piece there related to our climate action plan, growing and maintaining our urban forest, having a community that values that green infrastructure and the huge benefits that the urban forest provides for stormwater, you know, both treatment and reducing runoff and all these sorts of things. So, we have spent a lot of time over the last year integrating components of urban forest and the urban forest piece into our climate action plan, as well as parts of our comprehensive planning process. I mean, there's a discussion with the climate and energy piece related to the urban forest canopy. So. Any other questions or comments?
Good job.
Yeah, just trying to figure out if or how we can help move the process along, and then what, if in know, I'd go back to the tree board and ask them for their ask. What would their ask be? You know, we've set a canopy goal. It's great to have the goal. What's the process? What's the funding? How are we going to get to that goal? So that I would go back and ask them that question, so that we're not just making stuff up on our end.
I will do that.
Anything else?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the percentage of canopy now?
26?
Going to 40?
So,
26.
based off of 2014 information, it's about 26%.
But that was before we've had some development in the past few years.
And that's true, but it was also before we incorporated Elk Rock Island into the community as well. So, I mean, there's certainly some trade-offs, but it's roughly that 26% piece there. We're getting ready to get some new information that will help us look at what the canopy was in 2019. So they're getting ready to do another aerial photography flight and do the LiDAR.
Anybody else? Anything?
Good work.
Yeah. Good work. Thank you. All right. Parks and Rec Board.
I'm going to start, and then all of the people who came from PARB can chime in after that, because even though I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, I win for attendance. Right? Thank you. So thank you all for coming. And all of this is in the staff report, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time telling you things that you've read, but PARB did a lot in 2018, and I don't want to gloss over it. And then just highlight the goals, and I would say it's fair to say these are still draft for the committee right now, and they really are interested to hear what you all think. And we have Councilor Parks as our fabulous council liaison to PARB as well, and so she's been there through all of this. So please chime in at any time if I've missed anything from your point of view. So in terms of for 2018, just some of the ongoing tasks that the group did, they continued their park visits and summarizing the issues and items they found at parks throughout the city, and then transmitting that to NCPRD. They also reached out to all the different NDAs and spoke with them directly about what issues they might be seeing in their parks and their communities, really to try to bridge that divide between, you know, what's happening at PARB versus what's happening at the NDAs in terms of the discussion. So there was a lot of that outreach that was conducted. There was also just a lot of volunteering at the farmers markets. We've got the concerts in the parks listed separately here as an item that PARB was really involved in with the NDAs, just to activate those parks, but also creating a wonderful community engagement opportunity that folks at, you know, Tree Board and Comp Plan and others were able to utilize to do outreach on a number of different issues. And then Earth Day. Earth Day was huge again this year, and PARB played an important role in helping convene that event and helping work through a lot of the different issues. Again, it was a neighborhood park, so liaising with the NDA about the event, and also just working with NCPRD and Solve and others to help make it a success. And as you saw, we had the governor come. It was pretty fun. This next year, we're going to be separating, as Peter talked about. It will be Earth Day and then Arbor Day separately, which I think will be good. It gives us some opportunity to tailor both of those events, I think, a little more specifically, and give, kind of have the Tree Board run with Arbor Day and have PARB run with the Earth Day component. So in terms of the specifics around 2018, it was Milwaukee Bay Park all the time. So the first action item, and Heather's here sitting on the side, so the project manager for Milwaukee Bay Park, helped keep everybody to task. But the first item from the very outset, it was a very intentional integration between PARB and this project. From consultant selection, so Lisa Lashbrook sat on the consultant selection process to help pick Two Wing Studios. Then it went into PARB kind of becoming the foundation of the advisory committee, which we talked about when you all heard about the project last week. So lots of meetings, talking about different design elements, and then also helping staff many of those community events. So actually going out and being volunteers at a lot of different Milwaukee Bay Park events. So PARB was really busy with that. Again, they were continuing to work directly with NCPRD on specific maintenance issues that would come up. So if there was a complaint that they'd heard that maybe fell outside of one of the visits, then they would work that at the table as well. Then they spent some time with the planning staff on the comp plan, since we just did, the Block 2 component. So there was some work done there. They also worked with NCPRD, again, continuing that conversation about programming. I'd say this continues to be an area that the PARB would like to be more engaged. How can it work more directly with NCPRD on how to program parks or program different NCPRD facilities? I'd say Linda Blue is our advocate on that, and she's always makes sure to put that out there, that if there's more platforms, more places that the city can participate to try to shape what type of programming is offered, that's of continued interest. There was also an action taken, so even though the district advisory board is not meeting right now, and hasn't been for some time, that's the advisory board to NCPRD. The PARB did go ahead and take an action and go ahead and decide when that gets back up and running, that the city formally would like to have a PARB representative on that body, and went ahead and made Ben Johnson that representative. So the vote has been taken, it has been recorded. The city is ready. Whenever NCPRD wants to have us, we know who we'll send. And so they went ahead and took care of that item as well. Lisa Gunyon Reeker, one of her passions is friends groups. I'm happy to report, and one of the goals was to try to activate a friends group for Elk Rock Island, and that did happen. Thanks to PARB and thanks to NCPRD and Tanya and the folks, the Spring Park Friends Group, helping to expand it. It's Fairy Spark, is that what it's called? Yeah. Fairy Spark. Sounds very magical. So now there is.
What's it called?
It's called, what's the full name?
It's Friends of Elk Rock Island dash Spring Park,
Yeah.
so FERI-SPARK.
Fairy Spark.
Fairy Spark.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it is cool.
One of the meetings
Yeah.
was really good. It was really good.
Is now a good time for questions, or?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
anytime. That was actually the last part of the 2018 recap, so.
So was the intent to create a friends group, or for the friends group to keep going? Is there any intent for PARB to continue to be engaged with friends groups once they've been sparked?
Yes.
Okay.
I would hope so, yes.
Could that perhaps take the form of someone from PARB attending those meetings, or being a liaison that's formally designated? Because I have, as you can tell from my facial expression, some concern that the initial energy to get Fairy Spark up and running again is sputtering. Yeah. So, and some of that is because it's winter and nobody wants to think about being out in the park, but also I am not really available, and I was kind of doing a lot of that leadership initially, so.
You seem like you have such a big engaged group of people. I'm like, wow, you guys really have this. And it's because just right with you. And you guys, you were talking about where you're going to keep the vests and doing all this monitoring. I'm like, wow, you guys are way organized. You have all the support. You're good to go. And not so much.
A lot of good intentions.
Okay.
A lot of good intentions, but yeah, I think maybe a little more TLC from PARB would be welcome.
Do you have regular meetings
No.
of the group? Is that something maybe a monthly meeting or bi-monthly meeting?
Probably bi-monthly would be my thought.
I would definitely like to strengthen that. And
Yeah, that'd be
I would
great.
also like in 2019 to work with the people at the Wetlands Conservancy and start getting them to bring their group. Because there are people that are interested in going to the friends
Yeah.
group there as well. Get
Yeah.
them all going.
Yeah.
The question I had, in this right friends group and finding the question I had for you guys is if you
Before I move into 2019, would anyone like to say anything else about 2018?
I would.
Okay.
One of the things I didn't hear you mention, but I think is important for just the community to recognize, it was through the efforts of PARB that the Parks Foundation was formed in this past year. And there's a board of directors put together. We're looking at bringing in people that have experience in, capital projects, funding and that type of thing, writing grants perhaps, and whatever. And there could be, 2 or 3 positions open on that board for citizens that might be interested in helping out in those ways, so.
No, thank you, that was an oversight on my part.
Yeah, so we just recruited a few new people too, so it's good, with fundraising always.
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah, fundraising now and in the future always, yeah.
Anything else for 2018?
Well, we've just kind of had some oversight with some of the parks that are either in transition, like Dogwood Park, which is interesting. And, meeting with different bodies that are involved with that, NDAs and Celebrate Milwaukee and so forth. And then looking at parks that don't seem to have a master plan, or like Scott Park, that are going to be kind of redoing the park design. So anyway, we kind of have our hands on that and are taking a close look at all these spaces that are transforming. It's really what they're doing.
Yeah, I also think that it might be important to point out that a member of the tree board attended the PARB meetings as, kind of an ex officio member of PARB. And that was really helpful. Andy attended, for many, or for several months, so I thought that was important.
Okay.
And that's something too, with Andy being gone, Andy was in close touch with me about different things and have you, so it would let the park know also about things like trees coming out in parks, that has we wouldn't even know in some instances, so it was good communication. So Andy's now moved to Bend and I'm turning off coming up in March, so we need communication between the 2 boards.
Sure.
So someone's got to step up. And I am turned out.
You are.
It's 8 years. 8 years.
She's
Well,
really
you have to be
excited
off
about
a
it.
year before you could come back on. Just thought it.
And you haven't served on the tree board.
There's room on the other.
I'm
Well,
here to
there
help.
you go.
Here to help you, Lisa.
Applications are being accepted.
You probably should have said that.
Of course.
Communication between the 2 boards. to make
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I really thought it was great that either Andrew or Andy would attend and keep the 2 boards
Yeah.
communicating.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be strengthened in 2019. Whether someone from PARB goes back and forth or someone from Tree goes on. I think that's, so communication is a lot.
Well, yeah, we started to get into it a little bit, but so for 2019, the focus areas that have been identified so far are, like Lisa mentioned, those parks in transition. So when the library was moving through, one of the things that was identified was Scott Park and what's going to happen with Scott Park. And so PARB submitted, I think, actual testimony as a part that you provided, requesting that that space be planned as a children's area, something that really works as a nice connection to the new library. And so we are working, PARB is working with NCPRD on hopefully getting some funds put into the budget through that process to help do some master planning for that work to go forward. Dogwood Park also, that's a little scrappier of a process. It's about the size of this room, and there's a lot of different, but we've all talked about it quite a bit. I'd say Ben Johnson is sort of the fearless leader and advocate on continuing to raise, even though it's a small space, it's an important space, and one that will really be right next to a real community gathering area with the plaza. And so I'm working with Layla, and we've sort of established PARB as the convener of this conversation. So inviting CMI, inviting Art Mob, to have some conversations in this, really the early part of the spring, about what can we do, what resources are and are not available, how do we make sure that these plans are incorporated into the thinking and the design for Coho. So it's not, I wouldn't call it a formal master planning effort, but it's still really important work. And I actually just learned that Sunshine Learning Center just got a grant for some play equipment that they wanted to put in Dogwood Park. So we're going to be inviting them to the table as well. They've identified a real need and that there's not really a space for children to go play on equipment in this part of town. So I would say we have a really amazing group of people that want to work on it. It's just a tight time frame and it's a very constrained area. So that'll be early in this year to talk through all of that.
So speaking of the constrained area, have you guys put any thought to whether the boundary of the park would expand once the lake is a creek, and what all it would encompass? Or would that be a new park, or would that be some other thing altogether? Or would that be the other side of the creek would it just be part of Kronberg with a creek running through it? Something for you guys to kick around.
Interesting question.
Those are all great questions.
We haven't been talking at that level right now. It's been more like, it's about to get torn up, and how's it gonna get put back together? But it's a really good question, and I would say that would trip more into this longer term, more master planning type thing that we're not doing right now, but that you'd really need to give consideration to what area is now available.
We don't really have a timeline on the, right? So, as far as I know, it's kind of shelved until we get these other projects done, more or less,
Just, yeah.
for the time being. And then readdressing that once we have the Kronberg pathway in and Kronberg done.
That would be the end of the year, theoretically.
Have you heard anything from ODOT about doing something with the dam? Last I heard was about 10 years ago, and they were all hot, and then it died off.
Well, I don't think ODOT was ever hot unless we were going to
Oh,
spend
they
the money.
Okay. That's the hottest I've seen it. I'll put it that way.
You know, our big
It's
hope
me, I
was
can
the,
talk about it. I'm keeping it moving I'm actually meeting with the regionals. I have it identified as a regional solutions project, both that and the stone building, and I'm meeting with regional solutions next week to schedule a couple more meetings for this next quarter with the parties. So, and I'm meeting, I'd say Nicky Wick, their new executive director, is really engaged on it and has been out doing fundraising, so I'm meeting with him and some other wetlands partners next week. So I'm trying, there's nothing funded to do it, but we're trying to keep the conversations going so that we don't miss any opportunities in the near term. So, yeah.
But it is interesting as we're thinking about putting in, stages and playgrounds and whatever, that are we blocking future access maybe? Just to keep that in mind.
right. I
As
mean,
we go forward.
there was the thought to hopefully having a trail that would cross under the new bridge
Yeah, that we.
so that we would have that off-grid crossing.
And that's considered in everything we're talking about right now. That's actually one of the reasons we have to do this work, is that alignment needs to be established now, so that we don't put anything on top of it or preclude it.
Right, yeah,
So, yeah.
good.
So yeah, things are happening in Dogwood Park. The Milwaukee Bay Park project also is still going, so that advisory committee still has work to do this year, and so that will be ongoing. So that's a continuing part of the 2019 work plan. We also, there's going to be a lot of disruption in Kronberg Park this year, and so PARB also has its own work plan to continue working with NCPRD on the ultimate mitigation and replanting of that area. How much of that happens in 2019 versus come in and do it in 2020, I'm not quite sure until we get the final construction schedule, but we know there'll be work and discussion on that in 2019. And then I have PARB has really wanted to have a vision statement and a mission, and got pretty far with it, I would say, but wanted a chance to kind of look at that again. So it's still on the list as something the group may want to do in 2019 as well, is, come up with its own mission and vision for where they want to be. And that's all I had on the draft goals, but we'll add friends group back on that.
And recreation.
And recreation, and then that tree board PARB communication, I think based on what you've already said, would get added on to consider, but now is the time for you all, or all of you, to jump in and say what else. I think this is a lot, I'll just tell you. I think you got a lot on your plate with the draft. But if there's anything else that's missing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so also that will be important. So there's a separate group that's being stood up for Carefree Sundays. But we definitely, Ben has been coming to those, and I think continues to keep coming, but we are activating parks through that event. And so PARB continuing to be engaged in that will be important as well. So I can add that to the list. Oh, I should have put Wichita on the 2018 list.
Should have.
Yeah, that's true.
It's something that's done.
Yeah, it got done in 18, it just isn't open yet.
Sorry, Wichita. We can put it on 2019 too. Yeah. Yeah, so the Earth Day event will be the grand opening at Wichita. It will be open before that, is my understanding from NCPRD in terms of access, but the celebration will happen on Earth Day. And and we've been working with Peter and Natalie on Earth Day, and I think have some exciting ideas about how to use that to help get the word out about some of our climate action work. So if there's a way to really use that day to help educate people on our climate action goals and maybe energy efficiency, we're not quite sure which way to go just yet, but we think that might be kind of neat. So, and celebrate the park opening. Yes. All right, what else? Anybody else? I've talked a lot. Thank you.
Well, I have a question for you guys. So, thinking about Milwaukee Bay Park and where we are in the process, how do you think council should be positioning itself on that? I mean, obviously, we're still working to get it to happen, right? But it's kind of now in NCPRD's hands. And so the process we're going through is looking at our council goals, right? So, for example, once the SAFE program was baked and we had voted on the things, then it was no longer a council goal. It was actually, a process that staff was taking over, that it just started happening. So our question is, do you feel like there's any purpose in it remaining a council goal, since it's now kind of in the NCPRD world for continuation?
You mean a council goal for 2019?
For, yeah,
2019 and 20.
2019 and 20, yeah, we do them kind of in 2-year whacks.
As long as we get funding for it, I don't see
Ditto.
an issue. But until we have full funding for it, I would still keep it as a council goal.
I agree with her
wouldn't want it to fall
completely.
off the radar.
So what would be the council goal? Because we're not going to be floating the bond, it would be NCPRD. So what then is the council goal around funding?
I think to assist NCPRD as much as possible on either combining a bond or working with them on the bond or looking for private funding elsewhere. Anything to do, because funding is going to be the key of where we go and how far we go.
Right.
My question, I guess, would come back to you, and if you kept it as a council goal, what would it stop? Or would it stop something else?
Well,
Yes.
it would stop us from doing something else, yeah.
That's the question.
That's what it would do.
Good point.
And
It's community engagement right now.
community engagement is the thing that we're toying with being a third goal, which would include things around the park, right? Because it would be pretty broad, but it,
Well, there's a lot of park stuff coming up in 20, so I think you'll be engaged anyway.
yeah.
You have a choice.
Well, but having community engagement as a goal means that instead of asking staff to do things on top of what they're already doing is, we're putting some money behind that intention.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
providing a real focus for staff and saying, this is something we value. We want to make sure that you're getting out to the community.
And it's going to allow
Getting
a
people
lot of the
engaged.
things that have started to really grow and become bigger to continue, like Solstice, and these have gotten so big that they're getting really expensive for the city. So unless we actually make them a council goal, there is no funding mechanism for those things. So that's why we're toying with outreach as being our third council goal, so that we have a mechanism to fund. So it'll be, all the things that we're all talking about, and a lot of them, as you say, involve parks, like the Carefree Sundays and all of these things. And I just don't know what, if we said, okay, Milwaukee Bay Park is our council goal, it'd be like, to do what?
I would say that you wouldn't want NCPRD to think that you're not overseeing it in some fashion, because otherwise then I'd like to see the city help shepherd it through and get it done. Just don't let them think that you've dropped the ball in any way.
Don't worry.
That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't
Well,
happen.
that's
It's too
like-
important to all of us
Right.
also, but
I guess my question
we're at the point where we can turn it over to
Yeah.
someone else, just as the mayor mentioned, like the SAFE program. Once a funding mechanism was recognized and, it was working through the process of the departments within the city to do that, it came off the council goal. So it's that type of thing.
And
very
like the
similar.
library, same thing.
Library,
It was a
same
council
thing, right.
goal.
Okay.
And
We
now
got
it's
it.
That
not.
doesn't mean that we're not still heavily
Exactly.
involved.
Right.
Still
because
very
obviously
We're still
vested.
totally involved in-
construction
We
is-
haven't had our next meeting, so I don't know that the funding has been allocated. I don't know.
Well, it hasn't, but it's not ours to
Okay.
allocate.
Right,
Right.
it's NCPRD.
Well, I kind of feel in the middle on that, and that the library was our goal. We own the library, it's on our property, even though 50% of the clientele is from the county.
Right.
And so the county helps fund the library on a day-to-day basis, but we have to expand it. I feel the park is kind of similar to that. We're the ones that are going to expand and put the amenities in it. If we don't get behind helping NCPRD, on working what they need to do in order to either get a bond or for us to get a bond too, or go out to the public and look for donations or whatever we do, if we're not 100% into that, it won't happen.
Well, so the donations part.
And the
we've
price went up, and
tried-
that's the
That's
key.
part of the problem. So
Yeah.
the council was kind of, okay, we have a funding mechanism. We have a pretty good idea of where we've got we've got this much in SDCs and we think we can get this much out of the county. We kind of had it all pulled together
Yeah, and
until the
it's-
price tag doubled,
Yes,
more than.
more than double.
And then, so now we no longer have a funding mechanism. So, what NCPRD said was, well, we're planning to do a bond. That's the way we're going to pay for this park. Okay? I personally had an issue with the fact that Milwaukee paid for the library all by itself.
Yeah.
During that process,
It
at
happened,
that
though.
time, I was in conversations with the county people saying, look, this is not just Milwaukee's library. With this, we are half of the people that use this library.
I agree.
The rest of the library district that we serve should be helping pay to build it. And they're like, oh, that'd be really hard. We can't really do that, blah, blah, blah. So we didn't. We just did it on our own. Then come to find out they did do it for somebody else, or they're going to do it for somebody else. I don't want to go there again.
I think we need to have somebody right in the center of NCPRD going with them on their goal to help get the bond going. And if we don't have a council member or somebody, that would be very supportive.
Yeah, PARB, and
Yeah.
I'm on the Milwaukee Bay Park.
I agree there, but
And she's
right in
on
the
DAB,
middle
too.
of what they're
And,
doing.
yeah, I'm on DAB whenever they
So I
get
don't
that
know on our
going.
timeline how many more meetings or what meetings we have for Milwaukee Bay Park continuing. So it's hard for me to say.
I think an important point too on the funding is that if we were to bond for it, we can only bond within the city of Milwaukee.
Agree.
And if NCPRD bonds for it, because it is a regional asset, there is absolutely no doubt that that is a regional asset. And if NCPRD bonds for it, they can bond the district. We can't do that. So it would not benefit us if we were to try to fund it through a local city bond.
And that's why
I
we
would
need to
think.
work hand in hand with them on what they're working on.
Of course.
Sure.
I agree.
That's different than it being a third council goal. I don't see any reason.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
Milwaukee
I
Bay
see
Park
it a little bit similar to, and maybe even more, I mean, you know, the library construction, I mean, we still do have a task force, just because it's not a goal moving forward, we still have a lot of engagement.
And
I
two
think
of us sit on
We both serve
that
on that
task
task
force.
force.
Yeah.
You know, just because we've handed it off to a construction crew and a, you know, a manager, project manager, doesn't mean that,
Doesn't mean we're out
doesn't
of
mean
it.
that we're not working on it.
I guess,
Nor will this coming off the council goal won't mean that we won't be having conversations with
Good.
the county commissioners to say,
Yeah.
get on this.
Can I say what will stay the same either way? So, me staffing, working directly with the project team stays the same. So my engagement stays the same. The PARB's involvement on the advisory committee stays the same. And so seeing that through to the end nothing would change there. I think the distinction in terms of council goal or not council goal is around, with the council goal, there was the $250,000 that was allocated via the budget process. That stayed, that's there.
Right.
At this point, until the financing plan is a little more clear on, it's not that it's absolutely important, but council needing to go ahead and say, yeah, they need to put this additional budget here for this next cycle is what they're asking about. Or if they have another place, they need to put those general fund resources towards a different goal is the thing that changes. So I guess in my view, and I would say, and I've shared it with NCPRD, I would hope that the council goal decision really doesn't have to be taken as a lack of support or any lack of commitment on the park. It really is a city budgeting decision for this next couple of years. And if they,
Based on that.
does that make
I
sense?
get it.
Yeah.
So with her saying that, it's still number one on your list, or one of those higher numbers.
Yeah, it's still,
Please.
just like the library, just like the SAFE program.
Yeah.
right? We have not slowed down on any of those things.
There,
Right.
there's an internal document that's got, it's a big long spreadsheet that
like
is
100
all of the different things that are going on in the city, and it's,
That
some of
we're-
those things have been council goals, some of them have not, but many of them have been, and they're still churning away.
Right. And we're still making sure that we have oversight into a lot of those, and getting reports, finding out what's going on, answering questions.
And I'm sure NCPD will keep me honest too, in terms of if I'm not providing the expected level of support to the project. They would be sure to hold me to account on that, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Based on this discussion, I agree with you moving on with appointing other council goals.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and, you know, if for whatever reason, 2 years out, we all decide that NCVRD is not funding, is not accomplishing the funding, then we talk about it again. We say, do we put it back on the council goal? Do we talk about bonding again? But right now, it's a regional asset. It should be a regional bond. The 21,000 people that live here should not be paying all $10 million for something that 80,000 people use.
Anything else?
Thanks for your input.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
I don't have anything else. but
Okay.
I don't have anything else
Worked really
either.
hard this year. Thank you for all of your effort and for always showing up.
Yes.
No comment.
Thank you. Thank you,
That
Barb.
was a dig.
You found yourself
The
on
tree
the wrong
board.
side of
You're
it.
gonna have to tell the tree board, they got all kinds of grief for that.
Well, Andy had intended to be here, and then he ended up moving this
Yeah.
weekend, like, all of a sudden. So, yeah.
That's, I guess, are we adjourned?
I,
Or
this
we-
one, you guys have something else you need to talk about? We are adjourned.
Oh, good.